From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster.
All right, welcome back. My name is John, and this is the Dewey Pod Monster Podcast. This is your weekly podcast about consumption. With me this week is the host of the Dewey Pod Monster Podcast. His name is Sean, and we are both proud members of the You Run Podcast Network. You can check out all our previous episodes, this episode, and all our co-conspirators that are also on the You Run Podcast Network at yourunpodcast.com. Sean, I went out of order, but that's fine. How are you doing tonight?
Okay, USA.
Oh, shit. That guy's already here. We got to get a name for that thing.
That thing?
That guy.
That guy.
Is he a guy? Is he an it? Is he a they? I don't know.
He doesn't even have a name. How can we even say what he is? We don't know.
Does he need a name to have a pronoun?
You lose, American asshole.
The fucking drop that we've turned into a morning talk show. How are you doing, Sean?
I'm not bad. Not bad. Just got back from, well, didn't just get back, but got back from a vacation. Nice and rested.
Are your arms tired?
Yeah, I stepped all over that joke. Yeah, no, they're fully, my legs are rested too.
Do you want to divulge where you went, or you want to hold that shit to yourself?
I went to the happiest place on earth. I don't know if Disney World or Disneyland. I don't know which one's like technically.
Sizzler. Oh, Hooters. Hooters is the happiest place on earth.
Did you say Sizzler?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I didn't go to Sizzler. I went to Disney World, did all that stuff. I don't need to go back for a long time.
That's good.
People in Disney World, they do not know how to not walk right in front of you or stop right in front of you.
So it's like the grocery store.
They don't know what eye contact is. It's like 100 times worse. And I don't know if it's like a cultural thing, because people from all over the world obviously go to Disney World and Disneyland for that matter. But I guess it's probably not a cultural thing because everybody does it. They'll walk towards you. They'll run over. This has never happened to me before. When I went this time, a child like stepped on the back of my leg.
Well, I got news for you. It's not an American thing. People are just garbage. That it's a human thing.
That's a human being thing, a human being. But yeah, I don't need to go back there anytime soon, but I'm going back for work next week. So that'll be fun.
Going to work at Disney?
Well, we have a day that's at Disney. It's like a global conference. So they're bringing in a bunch of people. And one day we'll be at the park.
They're going to teach you how to fix Space Mountain.
Maybe it's like a trial of patience or something.
Oh, that makes sense. Did you get a chance to watch anything worth talking about while you were gallivanting around the happiest place in Florida?
Well, you know, the great thing about flying, because I didn't drive this time. We generally drive to Florida.
I was shocked when you told me you weren't driving.
I know. We had a short jaunt. So the great thing about not driving is that you get some time on a plane that you can watch stuff that you want to watch. So I got to finally finish. I flew through about 6 episodes of the most recent season of Fargo.
Okay.
So I'm glad that I got that under my belt. It was a good season. It probably lasted about 20 minutes too long. I felt like the ending was a little bit different than Fargo usually goes. There's a weird supernatural element to the season, which I don't think I remember in previous seasons.
Fargo?
Yeah, I don't want to give it away.
I've only watched the movie and like half of the first season.
Oh, really?
Yeah, well, I think we've had this conversation off mic before, but
yeah, I think we did.
The first season didn't really grip me, which is weird because that's the one with Billy Bob in it. I usually, or at least at the time, liked him.
Mm-hmm.
I've always heard good things. I don't know. I'm really bad at if I either start late on a series or fall off of a series, getting around to it or getting back to it. It's the same reason why I haven't gone and watched any Stranger Things after season 1 is once it's so far in the rear view. It's really hard for me to go back and kind of take the time to sit down and watch it.
I like that a little bit more. I like to be able to have all those episodes stacked up and not have to wait for them to air.
Yes, but there's a window there. Like
yeah, true.
If we're more than like
it gets to be so old.
Yeah, a year out, or if the next season starts in the interim in there, I'm pretty much like I'm done.
Oh, that's my favorite is when the next season starts because then you can catch up and again a word I don't know how to use here, but you can just catch up and then you can you're hitting the ground running and you can just run into the next season.
Yeah, fair enough.
To each their own.
It's good though. This was a season 6 or
5.
Season 5?
This one's 5. This one was really good. I think 3 has been my favorite so far. That's with, I think Jesse Plemons is in that season and Kristen Dunst. I was going to say old Snaggletooth, but I couldn't because I couldn't remember her name. But she's in that season.
I don't like her.
She's okay in this series. There was another series she was in on Showtime called, I can't remember what the hell it's called.
At the risk of sounding incredibly like chauvinistic, she aged horribly quickly. just from a pure, like, watching a movie star, like, aesthetic. It's like she did those Spider-Man movies, and all of a sudden, like, between 1 and 3, I'm like, when did she add like 50 years of age to her? What the fuck happened?
Well, I think the thing with her too is that she's grown up in
the spotlight,
on screen, basically, from Interview with a Vampire all the way up till to whatever she's doing now. She's okay. I don't really have a big opinion on her, but she was good in that season. Other than that, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. I got a chance to watch Until the Light Takes Us, which is that documentary about the history of Norwegian black metal, basically.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd recommend it. It wasn't all that. It was interesting, but the way that the story they're trying to tell is told is so just shoddy, and it's all over the place. I think it's about an hour and a half long, and it takes till about 45 minutes till it actually kind of gets exciting, because they're telling it from like multiple people's angles, and they just don't get to the point. They're like listening to me talk about a show. They take forever to get the point.
Was I right? That's the one that's about that band or guy or whatever that burned down some house with like a family in it or something like that? Or am I thinking of a different Norwegian death metal band?
It's kind of about that. It's about the scene, the early black metal scene, and they were responsible for burning a bunch of churches in Norway.
Okay.
And one of the guys in the band ended up committing suicide, and the other band member came in and found him days later and thought it would be cool to take a picture of him, and they used the picture of his head blown open as their album cover. So it's just a
classy.
Yeah, it's just really kind of weird. One of the guys went to jail he said that he did the crime, or he said he didn't do the crime, but they could somehow attach him to it. And he was talking about his like production, his whole philosophy around making music was like anti-production. So he used like a headphone as a microphone, and he would use like the worst amps he could find, and they would record that, and that's how he kind of came up with his sound. The movie really, it's kind of funny to say this, the movie really drags until about halfway through when they start talking about all those church burnings that we kind of knew about, and that's when it starts to get interesting.
Okay.
But I don't know, it was just not, I didn't really feel like it was worthy of another watch, maybe even worthy of this watch.
I feel like I've seen that before. Like, I'm 90% sure that I've seen this documentary before. And even looking at the cover for it, I was like, God, I'm pretty sure I've seen this. So either it's so good that I've erased the majority of it from my memory, or I didn't watch it and I just heard enough about it to know the gist of it.
I had a kind of a moment like that. The last thing I'll talk about that I watched was a movie called Truth or Dare or Critical Madness. And I had seen it before, but I remember hearing a lot about the movie. This was one of those movies where you ever have a friend when you were younger. You ever have a friend when you were younger, John?
No.
Did you ever have a friend when you were younger that watched a movie and they would tell you about it, and you feel like they told you so much about it that you've seen the movie yourself, and then when you actually watch the movie, it's a little disappointing?
Often, yeah.
Yeah. This movie was a movie that I remember watching years ago. Well, I didn't remember watching it years ago until I rewatched it, and it's basically about a guy who walks in on his wife having an affair, and he kind of loses his mind, and he leaves and he goes driving, and he finds a hitchhiker on the side of the road, and he picks her up, and it ends up that she's like a figment of his imagination, and they have these truth or dare contests or questions or whatever, and she says stuff like, I dare you to rip out your tongue, I dare you to rip out your eyeball, and he does, and then he gets he gets admitted to a insane asylum, and they have like all these scrolling things, and about 13 months later, and they show this same hospital multiple times, and it's like 13 months later, 4 months later. Anyways, it's a pretty, I don't know, wacky movie. It's by Tim Ritter. Tim Ritter wrote and directed it, and you might not know that name, but one of the answers to our question of the week a couple weeks back was like underrated B movie or B movie we should watch, and the person mentioned Shark of the Corn.
Yeah.
And he's the writer-director of Shark of the Corn. So,
okay, high bar.
The thing that I found interesting is they have a YouTube channel, and I think it's Truth or Dare movie or something like that. I'll link it in the show notes, but it's actually like a 50-minute behind the scenes documentary, I guess, or something, clips of how they made the movie, how they built the sets and everything. So I gotta fall down that rabbit hole and find time to watch that. But yeah, that's really all I got a chance to watch this week. It was a lot of walking around, putting in my steps at Disney and all that fun stuff.
No, I haven't been to Disney since I was like a little kid, so you'd be more well versed in it than me. I don't want to pay to go.
I've been way too many times in the past 10 years or so.
I was going to say, I feel like you've been there relatively recently, but what the fuck do I know?
I hadn't been since 2019, but my family went last year around this time, and I was recovering from I had just gotten done with my surgery, and I couldn't take time off of work to go with them last year, so it was them being gone was a bit of a mini vacation for me.
Okay, that might be but
I ended up working that time, and this time I was able to go off for a few days and do it with them. It was nice weather. It was like 80s.
It's actually not been terribly cold. I mean, I guess it depends on what you think terribly cold is. It's been like mid 30s, which for Michigan January is damn near balmy. But basically after that, like deep freeze broke, it's been fine. But that's fine. I didn't want to go outside anyway, and I watched some other shit. Got a new TV. So I broke that in by rewatching Machete, because what better way to break in a TV than with Machete, right? You gotta pop the cherry with Danny Trejo and Steven Seagal wrestling it out. That's not, we did a whole episode on that though, so if you want to hear that, you can go back. You know how I said I like car restoration shows where they go find some dirtbag car and restore it?
Yeah.
So I found this new show that's on Netflix. It's called Tex-Mex Motors, where basically these guys have a shop in Texas and they drive into Mexico and get these like rusted out cars, and they're paying a lot less because they're paying in pesos instead of dollars, and they're paying just cheaper prices. So what's great about this show, like the most of the show, like once they get the car over the border, it's just typical. We gotta strip this shit and put this shit on and whatever. It's your typical car show at that point. What's great is they send this big, lanky, goofy looking white motherfucker with this Mexican guy down there who's essentially like his translator, who has a bunch of contacts or whatever. And his contacts, you learn pretty quickly, are questionable. They go to this first or second place, and they're like trying to buy this 1960s Bronco, and it's behind this fence. But they can't really get behind the fence. The guy's not responding. So they send a drone over the fence to go get a closer look at the car, and lo and behold, here comes this crazy Mexican guy who owns the Bronco holding machete, and he whacks the shit out of their drone and starts chasing them with the machete before they flash a wad of cash at him to get him to calm the fuck down, and they still buy the truck from him.
Yeah,
shit like that happens a couple times. That was the high point, is when the dude came out with the machete. But there's a couple crazy Mexican folk that don't take too kindly to these people who want to buy their rusted out garbage, apparently. And when that happens, shenanigans ensue. So that's, if you don't like car restoration shows or that type of show, then I don't think that's worth your time for. But if you do like that kind of stuff, you get some characters in this one at least. I did finish In Search of Tomorrow, which I was about halfway through that, I think, the last time we recorded, and I can say your suspicions of when you gave up on it doesn't really change. So it's still good. It's still moderately interesting, but comparing it to I'm going to call it its predecessor, I think it came out in the middle of the In Search of Darkness movies, plural. It's just, those are just better. I mean, it's simply put, I don't want to trash it, but those are just more well done in pretty much every way. Aside from that, I watched rewatched the movie Vice Academy, which we were talking about during the Linnea Quigley horror workout episode, because I hadn't seen it in forever. And I forgot that Linnea Quigley punches a girl in the asshole in that movie, and that's pretty entertaining. So the movie itself is like ridiculous and borderline like Showtime porn type stuff in a lot of ways. It's more of a raunchy, like, cop procedural comedy than it is anything else. But when it goes raunchy comedy, it's really over the top and just kind of funny. So that's worth checking out. And then the only other movie I watched, and this might have, the movie does not hold up to this, but the title is pretty great. It's called Attack of the Cockface Killer. And this very well could be the worst fucking movie that, like, this is right down there with Paranormal Bus and all that shit. I would rather watch Black Double Doll from Hell again than watch this movie. And you know how much I love that movie.
High praise.
This movie is from 2002, and it's like some random Hot Topic said, you know what, all 6 of us employees, we're gonna make this really shitty movie. But we don't know if we want it to be a shitty porno movie or a shitty horror movie. When I say porno movie, I mean you're seeing literal, like, pornographic, like actual pornographic scenes, not like movie porn, like R-rated movie. You're seeing dick going in ass. You're seeing
penetration.
You're seeing everything in this, and very unglamorous too. Like it's like, this is what you should have played to make people not want to have sex in high school, because there's nothing about this that's attractive right now. So it's got that. going or not going for it. But it's like they said, we're going to make a really shitty porno movie or a really shitty horror movie, but we're going to fail at both spectacularly. On the plus side, it's only like an hour and 20 minutes long, and there's sequels. So maybe I'll subject myself to that bullshit at some point.
There are sequels.
There's at least one, because the sequel is called Gorgasm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's really no reason that I should want to watch the sequels. I'm not going to go as far to say that I want to, but if I start a franchise, you got to finish it.
I saw that and I started just kind of scanning through it, skipping around in it, and I was like, this is not something that I want to watch.
No,
it just
not.
looked really not good. It had that look to it. Had that not good look to it.
It's crummy to the point where I don't even want to suggest it for Crummy Movie March, because it's not just crummy. It's not crummy and shitty in a way that's entertaining. It's just crummy and shitty. And it's just, I don't know. I wasn't on the right drugs to appreciate it, and I'm not sure those drugs exist currently. Other than that, the only other thing I watched is I was happy to see Larry David physically assault Elmo on the Today Show yesterday morning. I thought that was worth bringing up. So Larry David continuing to be the voice of my generation, even though he's got like 30 years on me.
Not the hero we want, but the hero we need.
Absolutely. There was one other thing that I got into, but I'm going to come back around to that because it ties into our topic for the week. So I don't want to go into that yet. That's what in the industry we're going to call a teaser. So while you can go ahead and consider yourself sufficiently teased, we're going to take a break and we'll come back and we will talk about the movie Bloodsport.
There's nothing better than hanging out with your best friends chatting horror movies. At Voices from the Mausoleum, we have programming that covers everything from found footage to gaming, interviews, and even the first horror morning talk show. Come join us. We're all friends at the Mausoleum.
All right, so we're back, and Sean has some interesting shit to talk about, so go ahead. We're going to say fuck Bloodsport for a minute. Sean, tell me something interesting.
All right, so we get together, we talk about what we're going to talk about for the show. When we decided Bloodsport, great, seen it for a while, put the poll up on X. That's the only place it went, right?
But yes, and by the way, X, all 144 of you fuckers had voted for this movie. Thanks. Anyway, continue.
We'll get into it. But anyways, after we decided, laid down for rest, and I had this dream, and it just so happened I'm making this up because it's from my dream, but I'm not making it up besides this dream. I had a dream that I had an episode of an unreleased cartoon show that starred Jean-Claude Van Damme, and he was a superhero. He had a superhero team. And I talked to him about it, and I said, hey, I got this cartoon show that you're in. And he was like, I didn't even know this was out there. I didn't know it existed. Like, he knew that he did the show, but he didn't know it ever got released.
You're not going to do it in a JCVD voice?
I cannot. No, I'm not going to do that. If it was Steven Seagal,
how about in a Steven Seagal voice?
I'd have to listen to how we used to do it back in the old days. But I went to go get the VHS tape, and I realized that it had been copied over with something else, but I had moved it onto my computer because I have a bunch of crap on my computer. I had this video. So I played the video, and it ended up being, instead of being like a 30-minute show, it was an 11-hour-long live action, like weirdo kid show. It was like a mystery kid show that had this real dingy, like VA shot on video kind of look to it. And it had actors in it that they went on to have bigger careers. Now, this is all a dream. This doesn't actually exist. But at the time, in my dream, it felt really realistic. Kathy Bates was in the video. I remember that.
Fucking shooting for the stars.
Kathy Bates.
Wow.
Pre-Misery. So I was just like,
I'm impressed.
I know, I was too. Shit, she was in this show. So I kept watching the thing and watching it because I just had this idea that near the end or somewhere in the show, it would eventually turn into Jean-Claude Van Damme having the superhero show. And it just kept going, and it never got to that point. And I remember thinking that Van Damme would be disappointed that I couldn't find his cartoon show that he didn't know existed anyways. But when I told him, he just seemed more interested to see if he ever showed up on this weird shot on video mystery kids show. And it was like all the stuff looked like it was filmed in a dungeon or like a dimly lit house or something, or a cave. And I woke up, and it was one of those dreams where it was so kind of like, this is so weird. I want to fall back asleep so I can watch the rest of the show. And I never did get through it, but I just thought that was an interesting tidbit to talk about Jean-Claude Van Damme and Bloodsport. for some reason.
Well, if it makes you feel better, I go through every day of my life assuming that Jean-Claude Van Damme would be disappointed in me. Don't know why, but it's what I know to be true.
You're expecting to find that cartoon show that he voiced.
Something like that. With that in mind, when we don't start talking about dreams and hallucinations and whatnot, we do start with third-party reviews. I don't think this is as interesting as The Dream, but we're going to do it anyway.
Thank you.
Katsumi K gave this movie 2 out of 5 stars, and Katsumi says, to start with, the acting is terrible. The actors say their lines like they did it in a recording booth. It also doesn't help that we are to believe that this is based on a true story. The fights were interesting, I guess. I'm not going to say that all of them are great, but it kept my attention. Case closed. Which, honestly, I don't think that's the most unfair review that I've heard of Bloodsport.
No, I don't think it's unfair. I mean, to each their own. We'll get into it. We'll talk about it. But if we head over to IMDb, we always read the storyline, we read the plot, and I can never keep straight because I'm the one that reads these. What is what? So I guess the one on the top is the plot. And what the plot says is Bloodsport follows Frank Dukes, an American martial artist serving in the military who decides to leave the army to compete in a martial arts tournament in Hong Kong, where fights to the death can occur. And if we scroll down to the storyline here.
They can, but they don't always.
They can. It's true. Frank Dukes has spent most of his life being trained by Tanaka to participate in the Kumite, the ultimate martial arts tournament, where participants are seriously injured, even killed. Frank decides to go despite being told by his superiors in the army that he can't because they need him. 2 army officers are sent to get him, and the trail leads to Hong Kong, but Frank eludes them. While Frank advances, he knows that he may have to face Chong Li, the defending champion, who has killed a few participants. And that comes care of rcs0411@yahoo.com.
Where do we want to start with this movie? So
I want to start by saying anytime you see that Canon Group logo come onto the screen in that C,
you're immediately happy.
Yeah, I know this is going to be a great movie. Tonight's going to be a good night, to quote the Black Eyed Peas.
I'm not going to go as far to say it's going to be a great movie, but I will say that it will be a watchable movie. I will say that you'll find things to be entertained with it.
It's going to be a great night.
Okay, fine. Jesus. Do you think there's a need for what story they try to put in this? Does it really matter in this movie? Because I'm going to be honest. I think so. We put this movie up in a poll. There were 144 of you that voted on it, and I didn't pull the poll up to see exactly how the percentage came out, but roughly 60-ish% picked this movie. And I kind of knew that was going to happen because this was much like Tremors, or what was the other one that we mentioned that was like on TV all the time? American Ninja. This was one of those movies that was on, it made the rounds between TNT and USA and,
HBO.
Whatever. Yeah, all those. It was on all the time. So I had a feeling this was going to pretty much be a dominant movie because whether you like it or not, you've probably seen this movie, or at least you have a good idea of what it is. With that in mind, do you give a shit about the story other than the Kumite? Does it really drive anything in this movie? Because I guess it's important, and I use the word important for lack of better wording to try to have some kind of reason for all this bullshit to be happening. But once they get to the Kumite, all the shit that happens, who cares? It never really comes back or really turns into anything other than what would later become Mortal Kombat, the video game.
Au contraire, it does come back.
Yeah.
I think Bloodsport, while this isn't the movie that I would pick for us, we haven't talked about a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie yet. This is the first one we're talking about. And we put the poll up.
Also, for the 144 of you that voted, there were 2 movies that both of us picked in there. Like, we both picked different movies and added a third one, and you voted those the fuck down.
Yeah,
so
those were the least voted. So what did we have? We had Bloodsport, we had Double Impact, we had Time Cop, and we had
Universal Soldier, I believe was the other one. I think it was either that one or the one where he's like twins with himself.
That's Double Impact.
I think. No, Double Impact's the one with Dennis Rodman.
Double Team is the one with Dennis Rodman.
Are you sure? I think Double.
I'm
anyway
100% sure. Now I have to look it up. This is going out. This is going to be immortalized. And if I'm talking about Jean-Claude Van Damme and I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, I'm going to look like an idiot. So Double Impact is the one where he's the twins. Double Team is the one with Dennis Rodman. I think Bloodsport, honestly, if you're going to get into Jean-Claude Van Damme, this is probably the one that you want to start with, because
This is a hard target.
yeah, I don't agree with that. I think this is the definitive one to start with. I love me some Kickboxer 2 though. So I got to say that, not Kickboxer
Sure.
2 with Sasha, what's his face from Step by Step, but like Kickboxer as well.
Sacha Baron Cohen.
So this movie, you can tell this is Jean-Claude Van Damme's first big role, because there are a lot of scenes. Your third party review said it. Acting's not great. I gotta disagree a little bit though. For being his first starring role, he's not bad. He's not great, but he's not bad. And they really utilize like the camera angle where he's the only one on screen or in frame, so that
They really utilize the facial expressions when he's in frame is what they utilize.
well, that and you can tell that they do it because if he fucks up his line, they don't have to retake a whole thing. They can just point the camera at him and he can start over again.
Yeah.
So I do think it's probably the best place to start off with JCVD. But I do think the story kind of comes into play. They show the training. This movie is glued together by training montages and montages of fights, and just shit happens in montages. He's sad on the bus in a montage after his buddy gets injured. They do the training montage and he does the blindfolded training. You know, Tanaka teaches him blindfolded, and that pays off at the end, but we're not at the end yet. I just needed to be contrarian for a minute because I think the story does pay towards the end, but there's a love story in here it's inconsequential. Like you could cut that whole thing and it wouldn't make a damn difference in the movie.
What I wouldn't mind seeing more of from the before Kumite of the movie, the before time, I would love to see any company, canon or otherwise, get another kid that does not resemble Jean-Claude Van Damme. And instead of having him just casting someone who looks like he could turn into Jean-Claude Van Damme, just overdub him with the worst fucking Brussels accent that you could find and be like, yeah, close enough, and move on. Because the way they overdub this kid for the first, I don't know, probably 20 minutes or so of this movie, it's on like Godzilla levels of overdubbing. Like it doesn't have the thing where his mouth keeps going like after he's finished saying whatever, but the voice that's coming out of the mouth and the human that's supposedly saying these words, I don't know if you could be much farther apart than what you're seeing on screen.
I was just thankful that the whole flashback kid actor sections were brief, because the kids are by far the worst. They're horrible. And I like the scene, part of the scenes in there. So Jean-Claude Van Damme, him and his friends go into this person's house and they try to steal his sword, his katana or whatever. And the guy comes and his son comes in and kicks Jean-Claude in the stomach and lays him out. And
As you do.
I mean, that's what I do when anybody walks in my house. Hey, how you doing?
I've been a victim.
Yeah. So he decides, instead of calling the police on this kid, what they will do. And Jean-Claude Van Damme, the young kid, young Frank, is like the most all-American kid. That he has like a Giants shirt on, a San Francisco Giants hat.
He's got, I actually made a note about this. He has a San Francisco Giants
And a
hat,
New York Giants
but a New
shirt.
York Giants shirt. And I thought that was fucking hilarious.
It is pretty. It's really funny. And
I like Giants in all forms.
that's all Giants. So instead of calling the cops, what they decide is Jean-Claude Van Damme, Frank Dukes, will help the son train in exchange for not having the cops called on him. So they go through the whole training thing, and the kids at school, they're at school, and the master's son is getting beat up by a bully. And he's like this martial artist. You would think he wouldn't be getting beat up by a bully, but Jean-Claude comes in. Frank, I'm going to mess that up this whole episode. So listener, when I say Jean-Claude Van Damme, I mean Frank Dukes. Frank helps him up, and there's a kid, and this is all just to tell you, there's a kid in the background with a Bartles and James wine cooler t-shirt that I was like, I need to find that shirt. That is an amazing artifact of the 1988 or whatever.
Well, yeah, most of the, outside of JCVD, most of the style in this movie is pretty on point. We haven't talked all too much about his buddy Jackson, portrayed by Donald Gibb in this, but between his style of clothing, his fighting style, his pickup lines or lack thereof, and his just general swarthy a-holishness, I mean, that's just casting and costuming gold right there.
It's like biker chic.
It's like ninja biker chic.
He's like partway between wild man and biker.
Yeah, and it doesn't make sense, but I'm jumping ahead. Are we still talking about these dirtbag kids, or are we getting into when he actually starts fighting? And
Well,
shit?
so from there, he's in the army and he's, I don't know, special forces or something, and he's training, and they say, hey, the colonel or whoever wants to see you, he's got some fried chicken for you. And he's like, okay, well, tell him to wait a second. He's like, he can't wait. You got to go now. He's like, well, I
need to take
I
a
got to
shower.
go take a shower. And so while he's going to take a shower, he like climbs through the window and escapes, and he's got to go to Hong Kong because his master's dying or something. So he visits the master.
Which is a federal crime, by the way.
AWOL is not cool.
Yeah.
So he goes to see his master. He's dying. That's when he has the flashback of all this kid stuff, all the training and everything. And then he decides it was the master's son passed away. And the master's son, all he wanted to do was prove that he was a good fighter and that he wanted to win Kumite. So Frank, a.k.a. Jean-Claude Van Damme, decides he's going to take the mantle and he's going to win Kumite for his master. And that's when we meet Jackson, a.k.a. what's his name? Donald Gibb?
Donald Gibb's the actor's name. Jackson's the character.
Yeah, Donald Gibb, a.k.a. Jackson, a.k.a. Ogre from Revenge of the Nerds. And I have to say,
yes,
when I saw that Ogre was in another movie, I just felt like I remembered seeing him and I said, that's Ogre.
Is this his only other movie? He's got to be in other shit.
He's in
right?
a lot. He's in a few other things, but I feel like I unlocked some big secret that Donald Gibb was not just Ogre. He was in other things as well. It was a big surprise. Because remember, I saw Revenge of the Nerds, and my mom was watching it with me and all my friends uncensored, and she had got up and walked away when all the hair pie and everything came up, so it was a real close call.
To tie it all in, Ogre was also on the show Step by Step, which we had mentioned at some point during this.
Sasha,
recording.
what's his face?
Baron Cohen.
Yeah, exactly.
So this movie is all about getting to the Kumite, or the big fight, which, again, it feels very much so, especially having watched, I don't even know how many times I've watched this movie, and it doesn't really matter. I really don't give a shit about anything that happens until they start fighting. I'm not even sure how much I care about the fights either, because it's very much so just do whatever we got to do to get to this, again, Mortal Kombat set piece, pre-Mortal Kombat, or, whichever. And then you're literally just, when they say tournament, it's literally just like random, like guy 1 fights guy 2, winner moves on, and you're seeing essentially a clip show up until we get to
a clip show.
The last fight. Well, basically, up until we get to the last fight between, Johnny Cage and Liu Kang fighting each other for the honor or whatever Kumite is. That, I know that's an oversimplification, but am I really all that far off?
I mean, I take umbrage with what you're saying, but no, you're right on target.
Yeah. There are some memorable things in the fight clip show. I do like the really badly busted out, was it a femur or thigh, but whatever bone it is in this dude's leg, where his name's not Liu Kang. Liu Kang's a Mortal Kombat
Chong-Li.
that's based on him. Chong-Li. When he kneecaps a dude or whatever and somehow breaks his other part of his leg. I'm not entirely sure how the physics worked on that, but it's kind of funny, and it's not a very good effect. It looks literally like someone painted a piece of paper mache skin tone and just kind of put some red Kool-Aid packet behind it and cut it, and it I guess it works. Probably looked really intense back in 1988.
I mean, nothing says I'm an asshole like a compound fracture, which Chong-Li, played by Bolo Young, by the way. If you're not familiar with Bolo Young, he's the Asian guy with the big pecs. That's like his claim to fame.
He's fucking huge.
He's jacked.
At the second risk of getting canceled in one episode, he might be the hugest Asian dude that I've ever seen in my life.
But I don't think he's very tall. He's just really thick.
Well, when I say big, I mean
built,
like built,
yoked,
not necessarily tall.
Jacked?
Yeah.
He's yacked. He's yacked, bro.
Jacked?
Yacked.
Yeah, he's fucking huge. I would not want to fight him. I would very quickly be like, you won, man. Like, Kuma, all you. Like, have fun. But I do enjoy Jackson's fights when he's in the Kumite, because his fighting style is very WWF. He just kind of goes in and overhand, like hacksaw Jim Duggan chops fuckers and like body slams them out of the ring and screams a lot. He's kind of got that going for him.
He's a big fan of the double axe handle, for sure.
Yeah. But he's entertaining for what he is. I think it's weird that him and Frank or JCVD get very buddy, because they don't say it, but you're essentially in these like death matches or whatever, or potential death matches. Do you really want to get buddy with someone? What if you have to fight? And they joke about it like, whoa, what if we have to butt heads?
They bond over Karate Champ.
That's true.
I mean, how could you not be friends with somebody? I want to go back a little bit. I'm not surprised now, obviously, because I've seen this hundreds of times. It feels like hundreds of times. I'm really surprised that with this being Jean-Claude Van Damme's, again, first starring role, and how many people are actually dubbed in this movie, that he wasn't actually dubbed.
Well, it's like they dubbed to get you closer to what he was. Like they tried to put you on Jean-Claude Van Damme's like level, speech-wise.
What? I'm just saying, like, with a non-English speaker.
Yeah, they wanted everyone to sound equally as bad as Jean-Claude Van Damme.
I get what you're saying. Yeah, maybe. But it's just kind of surprising because Bolo Young doesn't say much in this movie, Chong Li. He says I think he says like 5 words.
Yeah, and they're all one word at a time, basically.
There are judges that talk that are dubbed. There are other random people who are dubbed. The OK USA guy.
Okay, USA.
And the You Lose American Asshole.
You lose, American asshole.
That guy is dubbed. But Jean-Claude Van Damme, who probably has one of the thicker accents of all these actors, isn't dubbed. I just thought that was interesting.
I think it's interesting seeing this young of Forrest Whitaker in there. I forgot that he's been around this long.
Fast Times at Ridgemont High, baby.
I don't know how old he is in this movie, but he looks like he could be as young as like 20 in this, and I wouldn't shock. Like especially compared to now where I like Forrest Whitaker because he kind of breaks the mold of Hollywood actor, like without, again, sounding totally shitty. He's not like an overly attractive man. He's got some character to his face. He's a little grizzled and he's a little rough, but he's a really good actor. And he looks like, you ever see a young person who looks like they haven't grown into themselves yet and they just look awkward and they're not quite sure how to dress, they're not quite sure how to stand, they don't know how to cut their hair, everything just looks slightly off. He's kind of got that look about him in this movie, which I remember that being kind of a common thing in his early movies. And truthfully, I forgot he was even in this movie until I watched it again because that's how big of or important of a character he is.
Yeah, he's the same. When I saw him, I was like, oh yeah, Forrest Whitaker's. When I saw his name in the credits, actually, he was 27 because he's born in 61. Okay. This movie came out in 88. And Van Damme was 28.
I would not have guessed that. I would not have guessed that he was 27.
Yeah, he looks very young.
Let's see. What else is in here what else did I write down? I did write down shit about this movie.
You know what I did like about this, the opening of the movie is rather than
I thought you were going to say the chase music.
All these different characters have their own unique fighting style. And rather than waste a bunch of time, basically, like introducing these fighters and like, who's that guy? What does he do? How does he fight? To put it in your words, the clip show, the fight clip show, the clip fight show, all those different fighters to have their own unique personality, you would have to go into all these stories so you would be able to tell them apart. But instead, at the very beginning of the movie, another montage, they just show all these different fighters training in their specific style. So then when they show up in the tournament, you're like, oh, that guy, he's the one that has the monkey style or whatever. Hey, that's the guy that's the Muay Thai guy. This is the guy that's the wrestler or whatever. I don't know if there's anybody that's a wrestler, but well, I guess Jackson's kind of like the wrestler. So you get to see all this stuff and they set it up really nicely because they just show it to you really quickly. And then you're already familiar with how all these different characters are going to fight each other.
I mean, truthfully, they're about as developed a character as Frank is. So why not?
And without any lines.
Right. So yeah, the music cues in this are great. There's a couple scenes where Frank is running around or where the fight scenes are going on. And the music is like, it's not easy listening. It's like modern pop, like light, like
smooth jazz
80s. It's fucking weird.
Peppered with Stan Bush.
It's noticeable because it's so out of place for what's happening on the screen. They really just would throw anything on there they would have the rights to or not have to pay for rights to use when
Well, I mean, like I said, Stan Bush does some of the songs on the soundtrack. So he's a movie guy, a movie soundtrack guy. He did Transformers. I'm thinking of Joe Esposito, who did You're the Best Around for Karate Kid. But Stan Bush has done other music. So it's like they got original music for the movie. And like you said, probably some other stuff that they had to save some bucks on and just peppered in there. But there are some interesting music choices depending on the scene.
I'm glad you said Karate Kid because that's going to come back up again. Wrapping on the actual movie part of this before I segue into something else here that's going to kind of go with it. I mean, this movie's fairly, like, I don't think anyone's surprised, like, again, here's your spoiler word. Jean-Claude Van Damme wins the Kumite in very, shocking fashion. It's the only fight that goes on for an elongated period of time. He does some really, well, he doesn't do this in the end, but he does some really like aggressive ball punching to kind of get himself there. The fight scenes and everything like in the actual Kumite, it's fine. Like, it's entertaining for what it is. I strongly think if there's any truth to this story, what probably happened is Frank Dukes or Dux or whatever the fuck he's calling himself, I bet he probably stumbled into some like early version of the UFC. And that's probably where he got the idea for what this is, because there is a quote unquote true aspect to this. I say true very loosely, but we'll come back to that. Do you have any real critique on the actual fight or the ending of the fight or how any of that shit leads up to and goes?
The shit leads up to and goes. You're talking about the fight at the end of the movie?
Really just the whole Kumite part, because I don't feel like you need to break it down fight by fight. It's not that.
No, absolutely not.
It's not that different. Just the whole tournament itself.
No, it feels like you're watching a fighting game.
Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of how I feel with it. So once we get through that, and like I said, Jean-Claude Van Damme's going to come out the winner. He's the guy on the cover. He's the reason you're watching this movie more than likely. You're blasted with a title card that says, based on a true story, Frank Dukes owns blah, blah, blah records from blah, 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 blah.
Fastest kick, 72 miles an hour.
Fastest kick, and yeah, like 372, 1 and 7 or some shit like that.
Fastest to the money shot.
I mean, that doesn't surprise me.
He broke my record.
Have you fallen down the Frank Dukes rabbit hole yet?
No. I just know that, I mean, reading all that, this motion picture is based upon true events in the life of Frank W. Dukes. And I was like, yeah, right.
So that was my initial thought.
When they made that movie, The Quest, which is another Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, I thought that was also supposed to be like some kind of based on life events of some dude. And The Quest is basically this movie again, but it's like higher budget and it looks a little, and Van Damme, I think he directed it.
Usually when we do any movie, I try to get at least one or two other opinions just to try to make sure I'm not missing anything or, whatever. I didn't think there was any real gold mine of information opinion wise I needed to talk about the movie Bloodsport. But then as you do, you start going down the rabbit hole on YouTube or on whatever. I started finding interviews with Frank Dukes or Frank whatever is and all this, and people talking about how his story is bullshit. I'm like, well, of course his story is fucking bullshit. Did you watch that movie? Like,
yeah,
obvious bullshit. So, the actual story as far as his life leading up to and through the Kumite or whatever, I don't even care to go into that too much because it sounds like he probably just, if it really happened, it sounds like he probably just fabricated it. I think best case scenarios, like I said, he stumbled into some early version of the UFC type fighting thing and maybe he won, maybe he didn't. But what I like is that there's so many interviews with this guy out there. There's people that question him on shit. And he has a very quick move where he goes, well, I was a secret CIA operative, so I can't really. I'm like, so you're a secret CIA operative who can't really tell anyone about any of this, but you made a movie about it. Oh, and you're on Regis.
The thing that I find so interesting about this whole thing is they show the title card, the thing about the Frank Dukes and based on a true story. And they say that he won the Kumite, that it was, he retired undefeated because, of course, he's the world beater. And the thing that happens in this movie that they talk about all the time, they talk about how Kumite is this underground secret thing, but it's talked about so openly by every character. I don't know how many times they say Kumite, but it has to be at least 100 times. It's not a secret.
One of the things they talk about with this tournament is it happened in the Bahamas, not Japan.
China.
But I thought they
Hong
said
Kong.
Japan. Okay. So, my bad. So it happened in the Bahamas, and they actually interviewed the president or leader, or whoever. I don't know what the Bahamas have. So president, for lack of better wording or accurate wording. They asked him about the Kumite and if it was a real thing and whatnot. And he goes, do you really think that a fight event of that magnitude could go on without anybody knowing about it? No one, not a single person? He goes, no, it's not real. Are there unlicensed fights that go on? Yeah, we're a country. There's probably some unlicensed fight, but it's not like it was a sanctioned thing. So there's all kinds of bullshit as to what records, if any, there actually were. But what I like about it is some of the shit that happened after this. Like at some point he got asked about, because he wins this sword in the fight, right? That's his trophy, is this katana or whatever. So someone asked him about it, like if he still had it. And he told him, no, I had to sell that sword. I sold that sword at a pawn shop to pay a ransom for some orphans that were captured by some Singapore pirates. Where's that movie? So
Give it time.
I think we have a Bloodsport 2. I think they
Yeah,
did make a
there's a
sequel
few.
to this, but I want Bloodsport 2 with pirates and shit. Just that is a rabbit hole. If you like this movie, which there's plenty of people that do, or if you're just, Bloodsport curious or whatever, do yourself a favor and go in and like, you want to open up like the bullshit, like how the fuck did this happen rabbit hole. Frank Dukes or Frank Dukes, whatever, just search him in YouTube or your favorite podcast, whatever. There's a bunch of interviews with him. Man, you want to talk about a guy who's just like really selling a line of shit. This guy's worth listening.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. That's pretty much the only thing I wanted to say. Like, I probably could go on more about that, but that was my favorite part of this movie, was opening up a consumption rabbit hole of Frank Dukes, whatever bullshit that I found for the last probably 16 hours, broken up between listening to stuff at work and what I started with at home. That was worthwhile. So you want to fire up the grill?
Yeah, let's do it. I'm hungry.
All right. You want to go first or you want me to go first?
I'll let you go first.
I mean, this movie's a movie. It's fine. I don't have any real particular love affair with this movie. It's entertaining for what it is. It's not a movie I'm going to tell people like, I can't watch this shit, turn it off. It's also not a movie that I'm going to go rush to put on. It's goofy. It's got decent enough fight scenes. The sound effects and the noises that Jean-Claude Van Damme makes are entertaining, comical enough. And there's times where I feel like he's trying to do a Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonation, which is also kind of funny. If you like Jean-Claude Van Damme and you haven't seen this, like, what the hell are you doing? I don't know how to help you there. But yeah, I mean, big picture, this is kind of right down the middle for me. I have no real affinity for it, but I have no reason to hate it either. I'd give it 5 ball punched hot dogs out of 10 beer drinking biker dudes doing wrestling moves and eating hot dogs. It's fine. It's fun. You can do a hell of a lot worse. We probably will by the end of the month, definitely next month.
I'm going to foreshadow my little spiel here, and I'm going to ask you a question. I don't want you to answer it, but I'm going to ask the question.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions, and I want to have you answer them immediately. How many times does Jean-Claude Van Damme do the splits in this movie? Don't tell me. Your answer will be coming up. My first introduction to Jean-Claude Van Damme was seeing him on Good Morning America. He was promoting Cyborg. And I didn't end up seeing that movie in the theater because I was like 12, but I did see it on video.
It's a bullshit excuse.
Well, my parents didn't even let me see R-rated movies unless they were on home video. So I watched that on video. And then I can watch Revenge of the Nerds. And somehow my sister and I ended up watching through his like back catalog whenever that was. Lots of great movies came out from that time. By the time we watched Cyborg and backwards. And I always like this movie because the setting, like I mentioned earlier, it really gives you the feeling of watching a fighting game with the different fighters and the different styles. Is it thin on plot? Sure it is. But I feel like there's enough to hold it together. There's enough montages. They can work as the glue. They can hold it all together and keep it pretty tight. I think with this movie, like I said before, being a great introduction to Jean-Claude Van Damme, it's good because it doesn't go into so much of that goofy territory that he ends up doing a little bit more as he becomes a bigger action star. The movies, the premises, while Kumite on its own is kind of ridiculous, they start getting like even more and more over the top. And this one's kind of still feels like it's a little bit grounded in reality, I guess. And like I said, this movie doesn't go so much into the goofy like I associate with a lot of Van Damme movies. So I'm going to have to give this 7 American assholes out of 11 hot dogs. Answer to the question: Jean-Claude Van Damme does the splits 7 times in this movie.
I feel like I would have guessed more than that. I would have guessed at least 20.
You would think he does, but 7 times.
Okay. Well, fine. Fuck it. Got anything else you want to add before we get into questioning the week?
No, but I'm looking forward to watching. I'm glad we popped our Jean-Claude Van Damme cherry and that we can maybe, hopefully at some point, talk about Time Cop, Double Impact.
I mean, we are in charge of the show.
That's
we
true.
Can watch whatever the
I've
fuck
heard.
we want.
I know a guy. He runs a podcast.
That's true. So our question of the week, pretty straightforward, is who are some of your favorite underrated action movie stars? We're going to open this one. This happened today. Today is February 2nd, so we're going to say rest in peace to Carl Weathers because he is definitely an underrated action
Did he die?
Well, I don't know if he's underrated, but he died today.
Oh my God, are you fucking kidding me? Breaking news.
You didn't? Okay.
I did not know this.
Well, this afternoon. Well, shit.
Oh
I'm
my
sorry.
God. I sent you a text. Do you remember the text I sent you just a week ago?
Which one?
When I grow up, I want to be Carl Weathers.
Well, I still would agree with that.
Oh, man, that's a blow.
It is. And he's one of those actors that, you know, I can't say there's a lot of movies I would go out because he was in. Like, I didn't realize he was in half the movies that he was in. But whenever he popped up, I was always glad to see him.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Action Jackson, motherfucker.
And he did. There's that, which is a great movie. I think my favorite role is always going to be him being Chubbs, just because I love how I always loved how they didn't even try to hide the fact that he still had his hand holding the wooden hand. Like his arm was just like inexplicably like a full hand length longer than.
Yeah.
But anyway, our first response was from our friend Scott over at the You Run podcast. You can check them out at You Run podcast everywhere. And he said, gonna have to say Carl Weathers after today. And he's not wrong. That's high praise. I don't even know if we've talked about a Carl Weathers movie yet. So maybe that's one we can put in the near future in honor of the legend.
Yeah.
Have we talked about a Carl Weathers movie?
Not that I can. No, I don't think so.
Something you can cut out. But was he in? No, I don't think it was that Schwarzenegger movie we watched. Which
End of Days.
No, not that one. The other one.
Raw Deal.
Raw
yeah,
Deal.
He's definitely not Raw Deal.
Okay. Then yeah, I don't think we have watched a movie with him. So maybe we'll do that soon. Like before you hear this, probably. So some of these I don't know, so you can help me with this. Some of these I do. So at Boozy2909 said at Yaphet Kodo.
Oh, Yaphet Kodo.
This is a
great answer.
Okay. So who is this?
He is one of the mechanics in Alien.
Okay, good enough. Our friend Average Strusky, he's got a YouTube channel, which is at Average Strusky, said, always thought Michael Bean.
I don't
know. Bain. Michael
Yeah.
Bean is an awesome, is and was awesome in action roles that he's played. I had to look up who he was because I was like, who the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, term Kyle Reese.
He's that. He's also in The Sheriff in Planet Terror. He's in Aliens, one of them. He's in that. He's another guy who's very rarely the leading guy, but once I saw who he was, I'm like, oh, dude, I've seen this guy all over the fucking place. Yeah. Good choice there. Our friend John, different John than me, as always, over on Facebook, said Michael Jai White, who has done quite a few things. I responded like an asshole. I was like, Spawn? No, he's done good movies too. But yeah, he's definitely got a great catalog under his belt. I like that pick as well. So we're going to switch gears and go over to X, where we usually get the most response. We're going to start with our friend Pearl, who was at His Face X, and she said, of course, I'm going to have to go with my boy, Danny Trejo. He has over 400 movie credits and is pushing 80 years old. This man is the beast and has done the majority of his own stunts. I love him. Viva Machete. I mean, I love Danny Trejo.
You broke in your new TV with the Danny Trejo movie. Machete.
Danny Trejo is one of my favorites all around.
I've heard you would eat his tacos.
I would. I have a coffee mug, Danny Trejo coffee mug. You can edit around this if you choose because this person didn't follow directions, but Danny the Devil Worshipper at Danny the Devil Man said Bruce Willis. Bruce Willis is many things, but underrated is not one of them.
He's quite
Agree
rated.
Disagree? Yeah. At Dr. Snake said Steve Buscemi. I mean, he's not like a blockbuster star, but I think he's pretty well rated at this point. Like he's pretty well thought of, isn't he?
I love Steve Buscemi.
I love Steve Buscemi too, but I don't think I would call him underrated.
No, he's rated.
Fair. At King Freak 1986 said Dolph Lundgren. He's actually criminally underrated. I haven't watched a whole ton of Dolph Lundgren, but I haven't seen him be so bad that I hate him either. So I mean, which sounds like an extreme, like polar extreme, but there's a lot of actors I could say that about. I'll agree that Dolph Lundgren's probably underrated. I mean, from what I have seen, he's never been bad.
No, I'd agree. I like Dolph Lundgren quite a bit, and I like a lot of his movies. I almost feel like he's one of those guys that he's such a household name that it's
because of Rocky.
Yeah, but he's just been around for such a long time. He's had so many bites at the apple and hasn't necessarily gotten a nice bite anytime, maybe besides Rocky. But
I thought he had a movie recently that he was in other than these. Anyway, doesn't matter.
I'm not sure.
I like this answer a lot. I think you're going to like this answer. At Law Dog Strike says Don the Dragon Wilson, especially for the Blood Fist movies.
He's been in a ton of stuff. And yeah, he's another guy that flies super under the radar, but he has a lot of movies. He's a big action star. I haven't seen a whole lot of Don the Dragon Wilson movies, though. I've seen him in stuff. He's probably another one of those guys that has, 100 credit. He's like a Cynthia Rothrock, right?
Oh,
where
sure.
She's just in a shit ton of movies.
He's a working actor.
Yeah. And a lot of action movies. And he's been the star and he's been a side character and stuff, too. So, yeah, that's a really good answer.
Our friends over at Dissect That Film gave the response of Devin Sawa. I don't know that he's in action movies. I will say that he's definitely fallen off. Like he came out hot when he was a kid, when he did Final Destination and Idol. He was
Idle
like
Hands.
the next
Yeah.
kid for a while.
Mhm. He was in everything for a while.
Yeah, and now he's still like working quite a bit, but I don't know the last time I saw a current, or it's probably been 20 years since I saw a movie. Actually, I take that back. The last movie I saw that I knew Devon Sawa was in was SLC Punk 2, which was not very good, but he wasn't the reason that wasn't very good. But I'll give credit to that. I know he's still working and I don't see his movies very often, so that I would say counts as under the radar for sure. This one I'm going to go as far to say is borderline, and this is an actor that I like dramatically more than you do. At Zip100473 said Bruce Campbell. I love Bruce Campbell. I am definitely the resident Bruce Campbell fan of the podcast. That said, I don't know that he's underrated at this point. If anything, he's overrated, unless we're talking about an Evil Dead movie. I like the majority of his films because I like Bruce Campbell, but I totally understand your perspective of it is he's just Bruce Campbell. And
yeah, he's just like a caricature of himself, I think. I mean, that's not a bad thing. He's definitely has his niche, right?
Yeah, right. And that's fine. But I don't think I could call him underrated at this point.
I really liked him in My Southern Family Christmas.
That was a fantastic movie. I really wish he would have fought that gator harder.
If only the gator hadn't eaten him.
He did actually follow up, though, with another response, which was, he didn't give this guy's name. You'll probably know it off the top of your head. The dude from American Ninja.
Michael Dudikoff.
I don't know. Michael Dudikoff.
Hell yeah, brother.
So he threw
Bread
him.
up.
Michael Dudikoff, Stallone, or Seagal. Let's see. So at Manu's Draw said Yasuku Masuda.
Drawing a blank.
Same. So go check him out. Let us know if we should watch this guy. At _Mystic said Michael Jai White doesn't get enough love. Tiger Shen, David Bradley, Oliver Gunner, Gary Daniels, and Carl Weathers, rest in peace. I know the bookends of that. I'm not really sure off the top of my head who these dudes are in the middle. Are you familiar with them?
Oliver Grunier. He's
Grunner, Gruner.
I think that's the guy from Nemesis. There was like a whole Nemesis series.
The Star Trek movie?
No, it's like, I don't know, futuristic. He's like a cyborg in the future. It's a whole thing. I think that's him.
So it's not that far off from the Star Trek movie.
Maybe not.
At First Mystic followed up and said, shit, I left out all the women. Yeah, what the hell? This is a total sausage fest on this list. And said, Etsuko Shiomi, I don't know who that is, Jija Yanin, and Pam Grier. I love Pam Grier. Pam Grier is fucking awesome. So I'll go with that. I don't know who the other two are.
Me neither.
I probably butchered their name.
Yeah, I think that was the actual official pronunciation for those names.
Is that what it was? So. That's fine. I'm going to hell. Do you have anyone you want to add to this list of underrated actors that we need to speak about?
I have a couple in mind. Michael Jai White, of course. I think he's really underrated, and he's a good actor, and he's a smart dude, and he's just a good actor all around. I gotta give a shout out to my boy Jeff Speakman. We watched A Perfect Weapon.
I knew you were gonna throw him in there.
He's a treasure. And Tim Thomerson, older but aged like fine wine. Big fan of the Trancer series myself, so got to give Tim Thomerson a shout.
So Carl Weathers aside, who I'm still mourning right now. In fairness, I don't know who's actually underrated and overrated in this genre, but I'm gonna say Tony Jaa. Like, he's got a lot of really cool movies that are really entertaining that I don't hear people. I always hear people talking about Jet Li and Jackie Chan and, those guys. I know Tony Jaa was supposed to be like the next Jet Li. I don't know if he ever took off like that, but anytime I've seen a movie of his, I've been thoroughly fucking entertained. I do actually really like Donald Gibb in this movie, so Ogre's going to get some love from this guy. Past that, I'm going to say all the guys in Predator who are not Arnold or Jesse Ventura. All of them. Big dudes.
Big men.
Big dudes. Yeah, that's all I got off the top. I didn't put enough thought into this. Oh, and I love Danny Trejo, but we've gone over that ad nauseum. I don't think we need to rehash that. Yeah, anything else you want to add before we start wrapping this shit up?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Well, then, in that case, you can find all of our stuff all over the fucking place. If you search us, you're going to find us. But you can find us on our site, which is crap.town. You can find us at the You Run Podcast Network site, which is yourunpodcast.com. While you're there, check out all the other shows too. That would be awesome. We're on all the social media outlets. We are at Dewey Pod Monster. If you search us, you'll find us. And we have a YouTube channel that is always criminally neglected, but you can go there and find a couple things. Maybe I'll put a video up of me picking my nose in my basement. We'll see what happens. Sean, what do you want to talk about?
I just want to say thanks to everybody that answered the question of the week. If you want your answer to the question of the week answered during the question of the week portion of this here show, you got to answer the question of the week. And you can do that on social media, anywhere that you have social media, at Dewey Pod Monster. Also want to thank all the people who have been going to the Spotify page that have been answering the polls. Hopefully no one has been activated, or maybe they have been. Maybe that'd be a good thing. If you want to leave us a rating or do something or give us some feedback, it'd be greatly appreciated to just give a review on all your platform podcasts of choice. I know that's not the way those words are supposed to be spoken. And if you want to find my Michigan craft beer adventures, you can find it at youtube.drafttherapy.com. You can also find me on social media at Draft Therapy.
That's fucking right. That's all we got for this week. Have yourself a good one. We'll be back next week, and I got a feeling we're going to be talking about a Carl Weathers movie. Maybe not, but we're going to try something. Cheers. Sayonara.
Bye, face.
My body's ready, my heart's on fire. I'm gonna push it over the wire. Perfect timing, tight as a drum. You find the battles already won. I'm taking hold of every moment, given strength by the breath of life. I'm gonna stake my claim. I'll fight to survive.
You lose, American asshole.